This is day 3 of the June 88 7-day retreat. There have been a number of responses in meetings to what was said yesterday during the talk about practice. What was mentioned was that an anxiety arises when one feels one has to give up something. First of all, I may not remember correctly, but I don't think anything was said about having to give up anything. If one feels a real need to count the breathing, observe the breathing, or whatever one is doing, there's no one here to tell one to stop doing that, or to give that up. And yet in talking about it freshly each time in a talk or in our meetings and talking about it seriously, maybe in concentrating or focusing the mind on the counting, on the breathing, something will be observed in addition to what is focused upon. Maybe there is an awareness of what other things are playing. Including, as this person became aware of, the fear, I may have to give this up. That's part of the whole thing, isn't it? And can that also be allowed into awareness? The fear, the anxiety about having to give something up, losing something that one is attached to, has found some security in or comfort in. We so quickly brush it aside, not we, the brain has immediately some kind of a response to fear. Oh, I don't like this fear. Too bad, now I'm afraid. How can I stop that now? Why does it have to come up? And with that, the fear isn't looked at in and of itself as it arises. At the thought, I have to give up this. To glimpse the connection between a thought and the state of this organism. Objectively, impartially, non-judgmentally, is to glimpse the functioning of this mind. This mind which is under observation here is the human mind, not just my personal mind, even though this is how the brain puts it to itself. Thought puts it to itself. This is my mind, my private mind. The fear of having to lose something, the thought of losing something, having to give something up, and the fear and anxiety that arises is a universal phenomenon. It's not my personal idiosyncrasy. can one begin to look at things in this way? With that, everything broadens and widens out. And with that comes understanding, not just what happens in this particular instant here, but in human beings the world over. The clinging already coming out of fear, and this is how we'll go on with this particular meeting. The clinging out of fear, and then the fear of losing what one is clinging to. And what does that fear do as it arises? Doesn't it close up the view? The in-touchness with the wind and clouds and birds and the people around one. When there's fear, there's an enclosure happening. And it goes from one thing to another. The fear creates physical symptoms. The physical symptoms create more fear about feeling this way. And being afraid of feeling fear, there's more fear, more symptoms, more thoughts. Can one begin to observe that in oneself as it happens? It is original research. We betake ourselves to laboratories and work on rats. That's what I had to do when I studied psychology. Work with rats. We didn't hurt them. We had to feed them and run them through mazes. And every Saturday and Sunday I had to go 30 miles to the University Drive, climb up to the attic and feed the rats. It was actually nice because I lost my fear of rats, at least white rats. They were nice. You could pick them up and pet them. They weren't afraid. I lost my fear of it. But nowhere in this 4 years of, and then some graduate work of studying psychology, nowhere did anybody faintly suggest to observe oneself. Hoping that through observing the behavior of rats and mazes we can understand something about the human being, which may or may not be true, but it's not original research. So here the laboratory is there. Can one inhabit it? It doesn't have to drive any place. It's right there to look and listen and watch, find out, and the joy of finding out, the joy of discovering things. It's not a thought-created joy. It is in the discovery, in the moment of insight, of discovery. There is joy, energy, a feeling of freedom, freedom from what was ignored before, what was dark and unknown. Unconscious, let's put it that way. Automatic. Without light. So coming back to that particular dialogue and meeting, that person described that if I don't focus on the practice, on the breath, and I'm focusing in a very definite way, there's some control involved of the breathing. In doing that, I'm not engaged in this constant dialoguing, role-playing that is going on in the brain. 1,000 dialogues with people and playing roles and so forth. With this bringing myself back, and that takes an effort, to the watching of the concentrating, focusing on the breathing, I can leave that other. That other is, it feels like a falling apart. Here, the mind comes together. It seems to be as one. How come we noticed that there were dialogues and role-playings in the mind? How come one can talk about that, report it? Obviously, there was an instant of attention, wasn't there? A moment of coming to as to what was happening. It's such an incredibly precious moment where one comes to, as a moment of waking up to what is going on. And then what happens? Please observe it for yourself. Zero in on it, as it were. What happens then as there is a moment of awareness that there's dialoguing going on in the brain? As instant as the moment of awareness as the moment of judgment, of that being the wrong thing to be going on. An evaluation of it, that this is being all over the place. These dialogues may also have had, very likely, we didn't talk about that, also physical accompaniment. Because very likely if there's conflict in there too, arguing maybe, taking sides, contradictions. And the feeling or the prognosis or diagnosis, I'm falling apart, or I'm going to fall apart with all of this. The mind is not doing what it's supposed to do. What it is supposed to do is be as one. And the way to be as one is to practice whatever one has learned to practice. All of that is going on. It's all worth taking note of, because this is the functioning of the mind. I want to interject here, because somebody out in California said that last May, and I forget the word. You seem to be fascinated with the functioning of the mind. I happen to be fascinated, that person said, in something else. You seem to be fascinated in how the mind functions. That may come across this way when I talk, but it should be mentioned. This is not sort of a hobby, something that I don't know how to put it. I see the utter importance of that, because if we don't see how the mind functions, we're deceived by it. And we deceive others with it. maybe we can go into that some other time, or if you wish to bring it up in meetings, please do so. Could be very interesting ground to dig. So coming back to the waking up to the dialogues, to the role-playing, that instant of awareness, and then immediately the judgment, the prognosis, and the command to do what one has done in the past and what one remembers will bring results. The results of being at one, as it was put in this particular case. Albeit there was a controller in all of that. And as long as there is a controller practicing a control in order to achieve an end, the mind is not at one. It is divided. Can one begin to get insight into that? That as long as there is the controller, what he or she controls, the means of control, and the end toward which the means are operating, the mind is cut up and inevitably in conflict with what is. Namely, in this case, the dialoguing that was going on and was noticed at a moment of insight, of attention. Can one learn as one goes about what is going on? And why not find out what these dialogues were all about? What the role-playing is all about? We're usually not adverse to overhear conversations among people, how they talk, how they play roles, how they gossip. Can one become familiar and intimate with what it is that the mind is concerned about, almost incessantly? What it revolves around, what it is that is agitating it or occupying it. The fear is one will be sucked into it. And that happens. One was sucked into it before the attention happened. And even though one may be quite skilled at controlling the mind through practice, it's not a perfect thing, and the moment there is a lapse in it, there will be the whatever occupies the mind. Why not find out what that is? Be intimate with the ongoings of it, thought and brain. Is that possible? Is it possible to see, without getting involved in it, to see at a glance what it is that one was concerned about, involved with, upset over? Actually, it is possible to see that at a glance. Maybe it'll take a little while, but just as when one wakes up from a dream, the whole dream seems to be present in the mind. If one starts to tell it, it may take 10 minutes. But upon waking up, there's the whole thing, isn't it? One was the hero, one was the victim. One had the power, or power was practiced upon one. Can one see? Aware and see. And not judge. Not wish something else had gone on. This is what went on. For infinite reasons that lie in the past. Everything in the past that has happened is somehow or other also involved in what happened the moment I wake up to a dialogue in the mind. The whole ancient evolution of the human brain is part of that. And what went on before there was a brain. And before there was life on earth. All of that is present in this moment of whatever it is. So it's worth looking at it for an instant and not condemning it. Because, of course, the condemnation is also a result of everything that happened in the past. Because we have been nurtured with our mother's milk or boxed milk to judge, to want something other than that, something better, something different, something more lofty, or something more juicy. So, waking up to what one may term chaos or falling apart, but at a second glance may just reveal itself for what it was. Usually, I think one is pretty safe in predicting it had something to do with me. In one form or another, in one role or another. Me and my different wants and wishes and fears and past remembrances. And all kind of different contradictory wishes and desires and fears, all expressed in this dialogue. One doesn't have to interpret it. I'm not advocating this. Some people have asked me, are you advocating analyzing what you see or taking it back to childhood? I'm not advocating anything. We're just talking with each other and looking at what's happening. Maybe that's advocating, I don't know. So, at a glance, see the involvement of the me and all of that, to see it once again. We can't see it often enough. If we do see it often enough and then some more, maybe we will see the circularity of these fantasies. Always revolving around the same thing, going no place. Not to be condemned or judged or wished away, but just to seen with a fresh intelligence which does not need to go on with it, which understands the whole thing and the wastefulness of it, maybe, the futility. It is in the seeing. I don't know, maybe the mind was occupied with some unfinished business that the brain is trying to finish, to bring to completion. Then why not look at that and see if one can think it through? Some scenario in which one was hurt or one hurt someone else. It's the brain still throws it out for finishing, for completion. Can one be flexible and free and not hemmed in by rules of what one should drop or do? One person said, what we are supposed to do here is seeing and hearing. No. They're not supposed to do it. We're wondering whether these things can happen. And we're doing it here. What each one does is not prescribed. It happens, doesn't it? So then, at the moment of being aware of it, taking notice of what it is that the mind was busy with, can the mode of the mind change from fantasy, remembrance, projection, to just listening? What's there? What's there is there. We don't produce it. The wind in the trees is not produced by the mind. Neither is a creaking of a chair or a movement of somebody changing a posture. The breath is there whether we pay attention to it or not. Can there be this awareness of the breath, which is not a controlling practice? This is what we're asking. We're not saying this is what you have to do from today on. It's just wondering. Whether there can be this switch of modes from thinking, cogitating, projecting, to listening. And the breath is maybe one of the first things that comes into awareness. It's so close. It's so all-pervasive. And if that attention is not controlled, not divided into the controller and what she controls and what she wants with that control, if it's whole, undivided, then it's not separate from the breath and the wind, the clouds or the grasses. And therefore no conflict in it. No aim to be achieved. These marvelous grasses. Have you walked up the hill, this field, and then by the pond and through that mowed path and watched the weaving and bending and flowing of those grasses? Some of them heavy with seeds, others still some flowers and some pollen dusting into the air. What controls that? It's the wrong question, isn't it? Can the awareness of it be as free as the waves in the grasses and the sound of the wind? And if it's gone, if the dialogues still happen, well, then that happens. One will come to again, particularly if one begins to be concerned about this whole thing and wondering why it is that the mind keeps holding on to a tune. We're talking about that too, how the mind can get so stuck with a certain tune. It's not the only thing that is stuck, but that tune is there in the background. Just in our life, wherever we step, whether it's in the grocery store, these days everywhere, there's a tune. When you call your doctor and he's busy, you get a tune. It piped right into your ear. You haven't asked for it. It's offered to you, free. No wonder there's almost no time when there isn't some kind of a tune humming in that brain. And one wonders why. Why is it there? And in wondering seriously about it, not just flippantly, but seriously, there will be more attention, more listening. And when there's listening, the tune abates. It's there when there's no attention. And it can be obstinate. It's just sticking in there. The next moment it's there again. Coming to, hearing it, why go into any reaction about it? Can this urge to go into a reaction be caught as it hasn't quite gone beyond the threshold yet? Then it doesn't have to come out. It can immediately abate. So there's just the listening again, without reaction to what happened before, without comparing how one is, how one should be on day 2 or day 3, how one was in the last retreat on day 2. The mind was calmer then, or was more agitated, or other people seem to be so much more calm, or I'm more calm than they are. All of this kind of stuff which unfolds when there's no attention. Let it be seen and not react adversely or excusing it. Why? It's seen, that's enough. With that, something simple begins to happen. One thing that was brought up in this connection was, doesn't it take some kind of effort to be attentive? At least for me, some people say it does. I really have to make an effort to be attentive. Maybe everybody feels this in one way or another. So, can one look at that? What that effort is? Not just make the statement and then say this is true. It's always been so, and other people have said it too. It's even written in some of the better scriptures. That doesn't get one any insight into what effort is. Maybe that's the least effort. To just say it takes effort and then let it go at that and engage in one's habitual responses. What is the effort? In trying to be attentive. It's also often said one has to try, doesn't one? It doesn't come on its own. This is another program in this computer, that everything has to take effort. We've been told this and admonished to put out effort ever since we were little. So there is this implicit thought in the mind, everything takes effort. And these implicit thoughts in the mind direct and affect our behavior. They're the power behind the throne. Sometimes before little children begin to walk, parents make the effort of trying to get the child to walk already. But a child that's left alone, does it make an effort? Or is it just the fun and the joy of climbing and falling. In a very relaxed way. Remember our little granddaughter last time we visited? She climbed on anything that was climbable, without regard whether it was shaky or wobbly, and many times fell off. Usually fell in a very relaxed way, picked herself up and tried again. But sometimes she knocked her head on a corner of a table or so, and then she'd scream. And while screaming, she would come to everyone present, and in a mixture of screaming and self-created language and gestures, she'd tell us what had happened to her. She was pointing to that thing, and tears streaming down, and these little made-up words, or sounds. And after informing everybody the thing had died down, and she'd climb up again. And picking her up sometimes when she'd fall down, her limbs, her hands were just so relaxed. Everything was loose. No strain in the musculature. The strain that we put into almost everything because we think, I have to do that. I have to cut the carrots. Watch sometime how one clasps the knife. Much incommensurate to what the knife needs in holding it and cutting it. The whole arm and shoulder, everything is involved. It's fun to watch those things, how one holds onto a pen as one writes. Again, incommensurate to what is needed. Or if one does exercises, yoga, the thought, I must reach the floor with my hands, gets the whole musculature, whatever that word is, tense. And one can, if one becomes aware of this, one realizes one doesn't have to tense. One can do this without that. If the thought, I must do better, I must try to reach the floor, if those thoughts are detected, and in the detection, let go. A stretch without the word, without this implicit thought of what I must do, becomes a completely different thing. It's a marvelous thing to discover. So, are we in saying I must make an effort to be attentive? Are we again applying old, habitual, learned thought principles, thought-body principles? Untested. It may not take an effort to be attentive. We mentioned earlier in the talk that the fact that there is awareness that dialogue is going on in the mind wasn't intended, it just happened. Because at the moment of being involved in some fantasy, there is no attention. And why does one become attentive of it, aware of it? How does it happen? I haven't found the answer to it. It just happens. One person mentioned it, came to a meeting and said, I just found something. Being attentive is not something I do, it's a state of being. One can discover that. And that state of being is there when there is no doer. The doer can concentrate and attain some partial attention. But complete attention has nothing to do with a doer, with intention, with will. It's there when all that other is quiet. Seen for what it is. Then the blowing of the leaves and grasses is no different from this effortless attention. It's not two. Because there's no one in it who directs it or controls it. That movement of the brain is in abeyance. The moment that movement starts, I must hold this attention, I must keep it, it's precious. How can I conserve it? Then that movement is active and the attention is gone. Or at best partial. Find this out for yourselves. This is possible. This is not something in Never Never Land. But someone may say, but why is it sort of arduous to have some sustained listening and attending? Sometimes people tell me, this morning I was really able to listen to most of the talk. The mind didn't wander, but there was an arduousness in it. We're not used to it in the first place. We're not used to really attending. We're used to thinking about things. This is the way the tracks are oiled and greased. To think, to fantasize. If we say, I have to relax, sit back in a chair, put my feet up, that's usually what relaxation is, to think and fantasize. It goes by itself. Takes no effort. This mode of the mind of attending in a sustained way is not a habit. It's not greased and oiled. We're not used to it. Maybe that gives the feeling of arduousness. Also, the other always wants to come in. Maybe there's a little conflict. One would like to relax and fantasize. And that conflict may be draining. But when there's no ideal standard or set up, I must remain attentive and wanting to become the attentive one, setting up a new image for oneself, then the problem and the conflicts start. The pride if one is the attentive one, the disappointment or if one is inattentive. And all of that drains the energy left and right. Also, we have been taught that no good thing comes without hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. These commands or these truisms work on us. They shape our behavior, they affect it. And they may make it seem as though it took a tremendous effort to be attentive, because one is constantly checking up on oneself. Am I really working hard enough? I should work harder. I used to work harder, or others work harder, or all the admonishments one may remember. also wanting a state, an end state, and therefore not interested or attentive to what happens right now. The dialogues, the fantasies, the pain, the fear, the anxiety. That's the whole landscape. It's the total thing, isn't it? Can that be seen with a new mind that does not know judgment or comparison? We will end here for today.